It's not because I just have so much money, I'm wiping my butt with $100 bills. It's not because I'm so indebted to God, even though that I am. And it's not because I just want people to see that I'm giving. So I came across this story. It was about a preacher who went down to New Orleans to preach. And he went into the convenience store, and there was a family in front of him, and they didn't have enough money to pay for their groceries that they had. And so he came up behind him, and he whispered in the man's ear, and he said, "You don't have to turn around. Just take this money and pay for your groceries." And they went their way, and all that came to pass. And later on, he was back. 7 years later, he was back in the church in New Orleans preaching the gospel. And after the end of the service, the man came up to the preacher, and he said, "About 7 years ago, I lost my job. My wife lost her job. We had nothing. And we created this suicide pact between my wife, myself, and even our young son, who was about 5 years old at that time. We were at the convenience store. We didn't have enough money to pay for groceries that we had, and we were going to give our son this last meal before we were going to continue in this. And there was a man who came up behind us, and he said, 'You don't have to turn around. Just take this money and pay for your groceries. And just know that Jesus loves you.'" See, that man, that preacher, that was that preacher that came up behind this family and gave them that money. It was that preacher, that preacher's money, that offering that he gave them, that eventually saved these people's lives. And they didn't go through with the suicide pact. They found this church as they were driving away from the spot that they were going to do this, and they were like, "We're going to come to church the next Sunday." And that next Sunday, they bowed their knee. They went to the altar of Jesus Christ, and they prayed, "God, forgive me of my sins." And 7 years later, it's a story of restoration, a story of salvation, a story of God's grace, of God's love, of God's power that allowed them to come to this preacher and say, "Look, 7 years ago, I was distraught. I was on the verge of death. Hell was getting ready to swallow my family up. But because of your offering, because of all that you allowed God to work through you, we are here today." And it's a tremendous miracle of God. Let's just give God a clap off with the ushers. Come forward. God.